In the city of Chicago, power isn't just felt, it's measured in square footage and the height of your penthouse. Tonight was the Vanguard Gala, a night meant to celebrate the coronation of my father, Robert Sterling, as the king of the skyline. The ballroom was a masterpiece of glass and gold, designed to make everyone feel small except for the man on stage. I stood in the shadows of the velvet curtains, watching the elite check their name cards at the crystal tables. Table 1, Robert and his chosen heirs. Table 2, the governors. Table 3, the investors. I walked to the very back, near the kitchen doors, where a small, wobbly wooden table sat tucked behind a pillar. There was a single, hand-written card on it that simply said, Staff/Service Silas. My own father had relegated me to the service staff in a building that was legally 25% mine. Robert Sterling didn't see a son when he looked at me. He saw a mistake he had to manage. After my mother, the woman who actually built this empire, passed away, Robert didn't just move on, he tried to bury her legacy along with her. Silas, why aren't you clearing the champagne flutes? A voice hissed. It was Julian, my stepbrother, looking impeccable in a $10,000 tuxedo. He smirked, leaning in so only I could hear. Dad thought it was poetic. Since you love the common people so much, he figured you'd enjoy serving them tonight. Don't trip on your way to the kitchen, little brother. I looked at Julian, then passed him to Robert, who was clinking glasses with the mayor. They thought they had stripped me of my dignity by taking away my chair. What they didn't know was that I had spent the last 3 years as the architect, a faceless entity that had quietly been buying up the debt of every single project Vanguard owned. Robert thought he was the king, but he was sitting in a castle built on my paper. I wasn't there to eat their salmon or drink their wine. I was there to watch the exact moment the foundation cracked. The sound of a heavy metallic clock ticking begins, echoing through the ballroom. At 9 p.m., the seating plan wouldn't matter anymore, because I was about to foreclose on the entire room. The Chicago wind doesn't just blow, it carves. It carves through the glass towers of the Loop, and the skin of those unfortunate enough to walk the streets at 3 a.m. 3 years ago, Robert Sterling sat in his mahogany-paneled office and handed me a $20 bill for a taxi. You have your mother's intellect, Silas, but you have her heart too. And in this city, a heart is just a target, he had said, his voice as cold as the ice in his scotch. He thought he was discarding a broken toy. He didn't realize he was releasing a virus. I didn't take that taxi to a hotel. I took it to the deepest, grittiest corner of the South Side. I rented a basement apartment where the only view was the underside of the L train tracks. The constant vibration of the trains became my pulse, a rhythmic reminder that the world was moving while I was rebuilding. For the first year, I lived a double life. By day, I was a common laborer. I wore a neon vest and a hard hat, working on the very skyscraper Robert was building to cement his legacy, the Sterling Heights. While the other workers were thinking about their lunch breaks, I was memorizing the skeleton of the building. I knew where every fiber optic cable ran, where the structural weaknesses were hidden, and exactly how the security servers were networked. I wasn't just building a floor, I was learning how to drop the ceiling. By night, the blue light of 3 refurbished monitors illuminated my face. I created the architect, a shadow entity, registered in the British Virgin Islands. I didn't start by attacking Robert's bank accounts. That would be too clumsy. Instead, I started buying his failures. Robert was over-leveraged. He was a man who believed his own myth, taking out massive high-interest loans to fund Vanguard's expansion. I hunted for his toxic debt, the loans he thought he could hide in shell companies. One by one, the architect bought them up. Robert thought he owed money to faceless banks. In reality, he was becoming the property of the son he had exiled. My transformation wasn't just digital. I hit the heavy bag in a windowless gym until my knuckles were permanently scarred. I stripped away the softness of my privileged upbringing. I lost 30 pounds of fat and replaced it with lean, functional muscle. I grew a thick, rugged beard and let my hair grow wild, hidden under a grease-stained cap. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see Silas Sterling. I saw a weapon waiting for the safety to be clicked off. I also began tracking Julian. My stepbrother was a parasite with a taste for underground baccarat and high-stakes poker. He was losing millions of Vanguard's operational capital, covering his tracks with forged invoices. I didn't stop him. I encouraged him. Through an anonymous proxy, I became his primary lender, fueling his addiction until his debt to me was greater than the value of the Sterling family mansion. Tonight, as I stand by the kitchen doors of the gala, I feel the weight of the kill switch in my pocket, an encrypted tablet connected to the building's main display. Robert is currently on stage, basking in a standing ovation, talking about integrity and legacy. He has no idea that the chair he's sitting in, the tuxedo he's wearing, and the very air he's breathing are technically owned by the man he just ordered to clear the champagne flutes. The seating plan was his final insult. My response will be his final day. The air in the ballroom was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and even more expensive lies. Robert stood at the podium, his chest puffed out like a conqueror. To the next 50 years of Vanguard, he toasted, raising a crystal glass that caught the light of 1,000 diamonds. The crowd erupted in applause, a sea of people who only cared about the winner. I tapped the screen on my tablet. Phase 3, the foreclosure, I whispered into my sleeve mic. Suddenly, the upbeat jazz music died, replaced by a low-frequency hum that made the guests shift uncomfortably in their seats. The giant projection screen behind Robert didn't show the promotional video of his new skyscraper. Instead, it turned a deep blood red. Liquidation in progress. The text flashed in bold, white letters. Robert turned around, his face a mask of confusion. "What is this? Julian, fix this," he barked. But Julian was busy. He was staring at his own phone, which had just received a notification that his personal bank accounts had been drained to zero to satisfy his private gambling debts. Julian's face went from tanned to translucent. The screen flickered again. This time, it displayed a ledger, a list of every toxic loan Robert had taken out, followed by the name of the current holder, the architect. Beneath the financial data, a video began to play. It was a hidden camera recording from Julian's last poker game, showing him sobbing as he signed over Vanguard's intellectual property to an anonymous lender. The whispers started. Investors began standing up, their faces etched with panic. "Robert, what is the meaning of this?" A senator shouted from the front row. Robert opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a man watching his own execution in real time. I stepped out from behind the curtain. I didn't hide in the kitchen anymore. I walked slowly down the center aisle, the heavy boots of a construction worker thudding against the polished marble. I was the only person in the room not wearing a tuxedo, yet I was the only one who owned the room. Robert's eyes found me. He squinted, his mind racing to place the bearded, muscular man walking toward him. Then he saw the silver locket hanging from my neck, the one that held my mother's picture. His knees buckled. "Silas?" He breathed, the name barely a ghost of a sound. I stopped at the foot of the stage. "You forgot to set a place for me, Robert," I said, my voice projected through the ballroom's sound system. So I decided to take the whole table. I held up the tablet and swiped right. Simultaneously, every light in the building flickered and died, leaving only the red glow of the screen illuminating his terrified face. A note, a heavy industrial grinding sound echoes, followed by total silence. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. In the red digital glow of the liquidation screen, the high society guests looked like statues in a gallery of ghosts. Robert gripped the edges of the podium so hard his knuckles turned the color of bone. You? You did this? He stammered, his voice stripped of its usual authority. I gave you a life, Silas. I gave you an education. I protected you from the world. I climbed the stairs of the stage, my heavy work boots clashing with the elegance of the setting. I stood inches from him, smelling the expensive bourbon on his breath, the same smell he had the night he signed away my mother's legacy. You didn't protect me, Robert, I said, my voice a low, vibrating growl. You hid me. You hid me because every time you looked at my face, you saw the woman you betrayed to get to the top. Julian tried to lung forward, fueled by a mixture of desperation and liquid courage. You think a few hacked files make you the boss? He yelled, his voice cracking. I didn't even look at him. I caught his wrist mid-air and twisted it just enough to make him drop to his knees. Sit down, Julian. You're currently $14 million in debt to a man who doesn't like to be interrupted. I suggest you stay quiet until I decide whether or not to call the police regarding your embezzlement. Julian slumped to the floor, the golden boy finally tarnished. I turned back to Robert. I didn't just hack your files. I bought your soul, piece by piece. The Sterling Heights project? Foreclosed. This ballroom? Technically, the lease was transferred to my holding company 10 minutes ago. I leaned in closer, my eyes locking onto his. You're not the king of the skyline anymore, Robert. You're a squatter in my house. Robert's eyes darted around the room, looking for an ally. But the investors were already leaving, clutching their phones and calling their lawyers. The politicians were slipping out the back exits, terrified of being seen near the sinking ship of Vanguard. He was truly alone. The man who lived for the applause was now standing in a room full of turning backs. What do you want? Robert whispered, tears of rage and humiliation finally welling in his eyes. Do you want the money? Take it. Just stop this. Don't destroy everything I've built. I looked at the seating chart one last time, the one that had me listed as staff. I don't want your money, Robert. I already have it. I want you to feel the weight of being invisible. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single, crumpled $20 bill, the same one he had given me 3 years ago. I tucked it into his tuxedo pocket. That's for your taxi. Get out of my building. Audio note. The heavy bass pulse stops abruptly, leaving only the sound of rain drumming against the glass ceiling. Robert Sterling, the man who owned the city, walked off the stage with his head down. He didn't look like a titan. He looked like an old man who had finally realized that the walls he built weren't there to keep people out. They were there to keep him trapped inside his own greed. 3 months after the Vanguard Gala, the name Sterling was no longer synonymous with power. It was a cautionary tale in every business school in the country. Robert's empire didn't just fall. It was dismantled piece by piece. The board of directors, realizing they were tied to a sinking ship, voted to dissolve the firm, selling the remains to the architects' holding group for pennies on the dollar. I stood on the balcony of the penthouse that Robert once called his sanctuary. The city of Chicago stretched out before me, a sea of lights that no longer looked like targets, but like a responsibility. I wasn't wearing a worker's vest anymore, but I wasn't wearing a $10,000 tuxedo either. I wore a simple black sweater, the locket around my neck the only piece of jewelry I'd ever need. A knock came at the door. It was my lawyer, a man who had helped me navigate the legal minefield of the last 90 days. It's done, Silas, he said, handing me a leather-bound folder. Julian has officially filed for bankruptcy. He's working at a car wash in the suburbs to pay off his remaining debts to the DeMarco Associates. Robert? Robert is living in a small studio apartment in the same district where you spent your 3 years of exile. I opened the folder. Inside was a letter from my father. It wasn't written on expensive stationery. It was a torn piece of a grocery bag. Silas, it read. The silence is the loudest thing in this room. For years, I surrounded myself with the noise of success so I wouldn't have to hear the truth. I thought I was building a world for you, but I was really just building a cage for myself. I saw your mother in the way you stood on that stage. She would have been proud of your strength, but she would have wept for the hardness in your eyes. Please, don't let my legacy of stone become your prison of hate. I walked to the edge of the balcony and let the wind take the letter. I watched it flutter down like a dying bird into the dark streets below. Revenge is a fire that keeps you warm while you're building it, but it leaves you in the cold once the target is ash. I had spent 3 years wanting to destroy him, only to realize that the most powerful thing I could do was to simply outgrow him. I picked up my phone and made one final call. Liquidate the remaining sterling assets, I told my broker. Every cent. Use it to build a foundation for the families Robert displaced during the Sterling Heights expansion. Call it the Clara Project, after my mother. And the penthouse, sir? The broker asked. Donate it to a youth center. I'm moving back to the neighborhood where the L train runs. I think better when the ground shakes. Audio note. A soft, hopeful piano melody begins, replacing the harsh electronic tones of the earlier sections. I am Silas Sterling, and I have learned that the seating plan of your life isn't decided by those who invite you to the table. It's decided by what you're willing to build with your own 2 hands when everyone else is trying to tear you down. Justice isn't just about taking what was stolen. It's about making sure the thieves can never steal from anyone else again. The fire is out. The smoke has cleared. And for the first time in my life, I can finally breathe.